Today, it's my pleasure to welcome here Dr. Glenda Satne from the University of Wollongong. This is not her first talk here. She gave a talk just a few days ago at the small workshop that we organized together with the University of Vienna. And she was talking about collective intentionality. That's her long-lasting interest. And today's talk will be also on the topic.
I want to thank you all for being here, and I want to thank my host for having me here for the whole week. It's been great for the workshop and also this morning research seminar and get to talk to you on several occasions. So as presented, I'm going to talk about collective intentionality. In particular, the title of my talk today is Layers of Collective Intentionality from the genus to the species and back. But you will see that I'm going to have a particular focus today. So first question is, are there different forms of shared intentionality, of joint activity? And I want to focus specifically on one kind of collective intentionality. At least one kind, and something that is generally discussed under the heading of collective intentionality, which is practical intentionality. So cases of joint activity or joint action. So are there different forms? And how does a positive answer to this question affect the shape of theories of collective intentionality, again understood in those terms? Theories of the practical, of the realm of the practical. And if there are different forms, how do they relate to one another? And finally, can we describe these layers in terms of developmental and phylogenetical trajectories? So the first section of the talk is called, in the honor of a very well-known philosopher, botanizing shared practical intentionality. So here are some examples of shared practical intentionality. In those examples, I'm going to take them from something like the common use or usage of the term joint activity or joint action. So first we have stadium waves and demonstrations. These involve big groups of people, generally strangers, that spontaneously coordinate their actions. This is one example of collective action, collective intentionality in this way. A different example is actions carried out by large groups of individuals, like, for example, enterprises or institutions, where members have only indirect, if any, knowledge of each other. So this is different from the previous one, because in the previous one, people are in the same situation, they are seeing each other. In the second case, they are not. Third case, action of small groups that know each other very well, and that they make a plan together to do something. For example, friends preparing a dinner together. This is different from two previous examples, right? And the last one, coordinated actions that are spontaneous and short-lived in space and time, but they do not include any sort of planning, like the previous case. For example, people walking together. People that work together, if they coordinate to work together, it's not just that they happen to walk one alongside the other, but they somehow start doing this. You might also think of examples of people starting to dance together, for example, when they are not specifically following some instructions on how to dance together, but they do it spontaneously coordinating. So, what do these different cases have in common? So one idea that philosophers have had in characterizing collective intentionality in the practical domain is to define collective intentionality in terms of a set of features. These are supposed to be sufficient or necessary and sufficient to define the cases that count as collectively intentional. And this I call the reductive strategy, because it reduces the features of these cases to one particular property or a set of properties that these actions all have. Now, the problem with this strategy in thinking about what these cases have in common is that they leave out or underplay the importance of some of the examples I just given. So, for example, some people, like Margaret Gilbert, emphasizes showing commitment as the feature that brings about collective action. But in this way, she must live outside the first case, the stadium waves, because there are no commitments. Those who emphasize individual intentions and meshing plans, an example of this would be Bradman's theory of shared intentionality, in which individuals have intentions to do something together, and they have plans, and his idea is that these plans mesh so that they fit one another, and there is common knowledge of them having intentions with respect to the other and a goal, and these plans. This type of theory will leave out examples like the enterprises or the institutions. For example, if we think of collective actions that maybe a nation can undertake. This, I must clarify, does not mean that they cannot, and that will come up in the next slide, that they cannot add things so that they will include these cases. But we will see what the problem with that strategy is in a minute. Now, those that emphasize group intentions, so the idea that there is a group that has intentions, and in virtue of this group having the intentions, that the collective action is carried out, they tend to leave out cases like the dyads, when there is no sense in them belonging to this, being members of the same group. You know, so that's a problem with that version. Now, some people, like for example Kate Ludwig, are defending what we might call a hierarchical account. And this is versions of the reductive account that think of core cases as minimal core cases of shared intentionality. So, for example, take the characterization I was given by following Bradman. This idea that there are, this is very similar to Kate Ludwig's theory, this idea that there are individual intentions that sort of hook up in particular ways, are coordinated by individuals in particular ways, such that something joint emerges. And what they say is that we can add layers on top of that activity. For example, group membership, and then we will get then further forms of collective intentionality that will be not minimal in the sense that the one that is picked up is as the core, as the minimum core. Now, these versions will still give out some forms that maybe cannot be plausibly thought as added, right? Because, for example, the stadium wave cases are not cases which you can think of as being first understood in terms of this coordination or meshing of individual intentions plus something else, because that core, those core characteristics or features are not given in the wave case. So the distinct case is out. But this might also be thought to be problematic because some people have claimed that capacities for collective intentionality are not something that is added to other capacities, but rather that every form of collective intentionality is somehow explained by the capacity of collective intentionality. So if these theories are right in that there is a capacity for collective intentionality that is sort of exhibited in every case, then the idea of adding layers is wrong. Now, you might think, well, here is another alternative. You can embrace straightforward pluralism. You can deny that there is something in common between all of these cases. And just say, no, they are different cases. This strategy effectively includes all of the examples, but denies, or at the price rather, of denying that there is a principle of intelligibility that applies to all of that. So there's something of the explanatory enterprise that is lost by embracing straightforward pluralism. It can offer no account of them as cases of the same kind, so as all cases of collective intentionality. They will come up as just the term collective intentionality will be ambiguous between different things. Now I want to propose, as a first step of my talk, an alternative methodology. And the alternative methodology is supposed to do this. It's supposed to answer yes to the following question. Can we make justice to the common sense intuition that all of the cases are cases of collective intentionality, avoiding reductionism, so the idea that there are core features that all cases share, avoiding having an additive account, so the idea that these counts as different layers that are sort of one on top of each other, and avoiding straightforward pluralism, the idea that these are just different things. One way of speaking to all of the cases, and I'm saying here one way, maybe there are other ways, you might think of other ways in which this can be done, but one way of doing it is to follow a methodology that does not look for necessary and sufficient conditions. Alternatively, you can think of shared intentionality as characterized through investigating some paradigmatic cases. This idea that, so there are paradigmatic cases through which you understand the concept of collective intentionality, but these paradigmatic cases do not give you necessary and sufficient conditions that will apply to every cases of the type. Rather, you can think of these cases as paradigmatic of a certain genus. And in this case, it will be a genus of actions that do not share an essence. They do not display an array of necessary and sufficient conditions for an action to be joined, but rather exemplify a category along which other cases can be considered as holding family resemblances. So the idea is something like this. There are good cases in which you can know that you have a case of collective intentionality. You can describe what collective intentionality is through this, the analysis of this case, but when you see how this case relates to other cases, you are not thinking that everything that holds for this case that makes it collective, a case of collective action, is something that every other case has to exhibit. Rather, there might be some features that other cases share and some that they don't. Yet still you will be able to understand these cases as cases falling under the same category. And I will be exemplifying this on the second part of the talk. And the one philosopher that is famous for advancing this kind of methodology is Wittgenstein. And these kind of concepts that have this feature that they are understood through paradigmatic instances of them are what Weitz, for example, defines as open texture concepts in Wittgenstein's methodology. So the idea is that you have these exemplary cases by which you understand what this is about without also committing to the idea that every case that counts as a case of that sort has to have exactly the same characteristics. In that sense, you maybe can think of a bee, for example, as a honeybee, as that lacks maybe one of the wings as a case of a honeybee, yet not having all of the characteristics, and there might be more and more examples of these cases. But then, in order to understand the concept, you must look to a paradigmatic honeybee. That's the idea. So, unlike other concepts that could be characterized in terms of underlying causal factors or essential features, open textual concepts are not specified in terms of necessary and sufficient conditions. Rather, we focus on paradigmatic tokens to identify the notion, and then we identify an open list of characteristics. And the idea is that some cases of the concepts might lack some or most of the characteristic features, and conversely, a few characteristics might be sufficient, and usually be sufficient, to be classified under the concept. And then the question about what characteristics and how many is a question that we need to investigate both philosophically and we can investigate empirically. Which characteristics are, how many, and which are the ones that we required in order to characterize something as it is. But it's not going to give you just one thing which is sufficient or one thing that is necessary. It's going to be an overlap of distinct characteristics. So let's go back. Now we have a methodology for thinking of how can we avoid these different versions of the, not really addressing the problem of how do we make sense of these different cases of collective action as cases of collective action, as cases of collective intentionality. And now I want to address this genus, the genus of collective practical intentionality. What is it? So we can start by thinking of a paradigmatic case of individual intentional action. So here is a case. Sally goes to the grocery to buy bread. She does this intentionally. This is one paradigmatic case of intentional action in the individual case, in the sense that in this case, the agent knows what she's doing. She knows that she's going to the grocery by knowing how she's doing it. She's walking to the grocery. And what is she doing? She's going to buy bread. And this idea of the how and the why question are two sides of the one coin. So why is she doing it? To buy bread. How is she doing it? By walking to the grocery. So this gives you exactly the same components, one through the how, the where through the why. So Sally's end is to go to the grocery to buy bread, and the means she chooses for this end is to walk to a particular grocery. Sally can answer a why question, because I'm going to buy bread, because I'm going to the grocery. And a how question. How are you doing this? How are you getting the bread? Well, by buying it in the grocery, by going to the grocery, and so on and so forth. So this is one way in which philosophers have characterized individual intentional action. And one famous philosopher that has done so is Elizabeth Hanson. And she classifies the kind of knowledge that Sally has in going to the grocery to buy bread as a form of practical knowledge, she says. That is a kind of knowledge that belongs to practical rationality, in that it's made intelligible by the agent's reasons for doing her action. So she's going to the grocery because she wants to buy bread. And these reasons provide a purpose for the action in question. She walks because she's going to the grocery. She goes to the grocery because she wants to buy bread. And this, as I said, the reverse of this is a how question. How are you going to buy bread? By means of going to the grocery. How are you going to the grocery? By walking. And all of this is intentional. So the knowledge she has, this practical knowledge, is revealed in the agent's ability to provide an answer to the question why, how she's doing what she's doing by providing her reasons for so doing, which have this means and structure. Now, so that's a way of taking a paradigmatic example of the individual case and trying to get at the features of this phenomenon, the phenomenon of individual intentional action. Now, let's move to the plural case, when several agents are acting together. And one paradigmatic case of that, now we think, what is the paradigmatic case of people doing things together? So one is in a case in which agents know what they are doing by knowing why and how to do it. So, for example, and this is one of the examples in our list at the beginning, Sally and John cook together a meal. They have decided to do so, and they have decided how they are going to do it. So Sally will chop the onions, and John will prepare the salad. We can, one of them is setting the table, maybe just together. But they have this plan, the means to meet the end, and they have this jointly deciding upon the end as well. So, in this case, we have the number of agents doing something together. They have jointly decided to do so by reasoning together about how to do it. So, we may say that in this case, the agents have practical knowledge of their joint action. And this can be described as the agent having a shared understanding of why and how they are doing what they are doing. So we are doing dinner by means of me chopping the onions and you preparing the salad. And I'm preparing the salad because we are doing dinner. And you are chopping the onions because we are preparing the dinner. So you can just run that through all the individual participations in the shared action. And the idea is that agents in this case, a pragmatic case of shared intentional action, they have this common understanding of the structure of the actions by understanding how they are doing what they are doing, all of them together, and each of them with their own particular contributions, and why they are doing it. Just similar structure to the salad. Now, I want to just give you more of how we characterize the genus. I want to say that joint activities of the relevant sort have a normative structure. Right? A normative structure means that there are things that are specified as proper according to other things that are also specified. So is the end of buying bread makes appropriate to walk to the grocery. In the same way, in the plural case, we have things that are appropriate, roles that are appropriately distributed among individuals because of the structure of the activity in which they are engaged. They're engaged in an activity that sets different normative roles for the different participants by means of these mean-sense connections, of which the agents, and this is very important, have a shared understanding in the paradigmatic case. So, joint intentional activities might be said to be distinguished from mere aggregation of individual acts. So, aggregations of individual acts are cases in which there is no shared activity. So, things are happening so that one is doing something, other is doing something else, but they are not really doing anything together. There is a result that comes out. So suppose that, I don't know, I leave this glass here, and then Nacho comes and leaves a plate here, and then Gerda comes and leaves a fork here, and then, well, you can say that we set up the table, but we haven't, because this is just an aggregation of individual actions. And then by chance, some state in the world was brought about. This is different from the structure we're describing. The structure we're describing specifies through this understanding a structure of appropriately related individual participations that defines normatively the way in which each participant has to contribute. So you might fail to contribute, you might fail to produce your proper contribution, right? You might fail to chop the onions, you might fail to prepare the salad. So normative, specify normatively the activity who is doing what. And this structure, as I said, it's given by the intentional action or activity, the action or activity to which the individual actions are contributions to. So depending on what this activity is, there are different roles that we might think are proper. This just comes off the activity in which these people are involved. When are people involved in a shared activity like this? When they are, one can say, they have the shared understanding, or as some people want to say, when they are knowingly committed to this. So when they somehow have the commitment of doing this together, and they know this, they understand this. They understand them, they have the shared understanding of the purpose, the why question, and the means, the how question, to attain the goal together, and then of the structure of rational connections that inform the action. This is the my characterization of the genus. And one more thing, we can think that the subject of this intentional activity are not two separated individuals, but rather a plural subject, or a we, that groups together different individuals involved in the action, because we are preparing dinner. Right? I'm chopping the onions, you are not chopping the onions, you are preparing the salad, but we are preparing dinner. And I think there's nothing really mysterious about this idea of us preparing dinner. We don't need anything over and above individuals. It's just individuals that are involved in this shared activity, and they have roles in this shared activity, and they understand these roles in this activity. And that's what I mean by saying that here there is a we, you, or plural subject. I don't mean anything more than that, if you were worried about it. Okay, so now I want to show you what comes of this idea of Wittgenstein and open texture concepts. So consider this case that Ben Lawrence has presented in a paper of collective intentionality. He says, this is an example he gives. He says, when a certain action is being taken by a ship during a storm, imagine the ship in the storm, we may imagine that an order is relayed by the captain to the first mate, and several orders of which the captain is unaware, in the service of that order, are relayed to the individual crew members, who do things of which the first mate is unaware. The captain will have knowledge of what the ship is doing through the order he has given, and the first mate through his several orders, and the individual crew members through their individual intentional actions. Sometimes the people performing a particular action may not know why they are performing it, and sometimes the people who know the end that ultimately explains what everyone is doing might not know what particular actions are serving them. So as you can see in this example, when there is a storm and they have to act quickly, and they cannot, it's not like the dinner case where we are having wine and we enjoy distributing roles and talking about it. This just happens, one gives an order, the other follows the order, and so on and so forth. And the knowledge seems to be distributed here. Nobody knows everything that is going on. So there are several ways in which you can go with this. So for example, Ben Lawrence himself thinks that this makes it that collective action is really different from individual action, and that you don't need unified knowledge or unified understanding of any kind. Other people might think this excludes this case as a case of collective action. What I want to say is that we can think of this case as a case in which some paradigmatic features are missing. Crew members do not know the whole structure of rational lens connections, informal interactions, nor does the captain, who relays the order. And yet, there is enough in this structure to qualify it as a collective action. It is enough to qualify it as a collective action. It's not, we understand this case because we understand the paradigmatic case in which there is a shared understanding. That's how we understand this case. We couldn't understand the case if we weren't considering this other case, the paradigmatic case. But once we do this, we understand how this is a form of collective action. A form of collective action that does not exhibit all of the features. And it might be, you might think better organized. And things can go wrong in the storm. All right. So that's what I want to say about the genus. Now I want to speak of the species, because the genus has a species. What are these species? So, normative means-sense structures of practical reasoning of the kind I just described can be realized by different practices. Those include practices of shared practical reasoning. The example I'm thinking here again is the case of people preparing dinner and having discussed about how to do it, right? So that's a case of practical reasoning because they have reason about how to do it, and then that reasoning is informing the way they are acting. But this need not to be the case in order to have a case of the type. For there are forms of minimal coordination, cases in which there are norms or scripts, for example, as well, in which we have those structures, even if we didn't arrive to them through practical reasoning. So let me give you some examples. One example is a small community group acting upon a shared goal. They have jointly set themselves to pursue by jointly deliberating about why and how. This is the same as the case of the dinner, right? So small town inhabitants can build a bridge or cooking dinner with friends. This is one species. Now, there are also actions carried out by institutions And these actions are carried out through members of those institutions that have a specific roles assigned, individuals that take positions as occupants of institutional roles. And you might think that in order for this to happen, there has to be, a number of things have to be in place, so there have to be special kinds of instructions and maybe rules or norms that specify who has each function. They have maybe writing or documentation is required, rules and codes are required. We might think that there are also some basic cases in which this detachment structure can be in place if there are some norms that inform their roles. And we can think of examples like military group actions. Maybe the case of the ship in the storm is one example. Action where the captain is the captain and makes the men. And the first is the first and the second is the second, and so on. Maybe actions of the developmental committees are like this, and so on. Now there is yet another species, which is one in which actions are regulated by splits, norms, rules, and instructions or orders, but I know of them because I'm highly trained in a practice that I execute with others. For example, an orchestra playing a piece together, or two tennis players playing together. In that case, we can think, there's one issue I'm going to raise, which is, as you might see already, these cases are not sharply distinguished. So there are intermediate cases. And the cases crisscross somehow. But still I think we can make sense of why, and I will say more about it, why this can be thought to be different species. As long as we follow the methodology I was suggesting at the beginning. Another kind of case is small-scale actions that I execute with others that involve spontaneous coordination and normal tracking of each other's contributions to a joint goal. We started with this example by discussing the walking together, the dyad case. So improvised dancing when there is no, so think of this. If we think of people dancing tango, that case will fall under the previous category. Because there you have pre-established conventions about how you should do this. But this is not the case when there's music, people start dancing spontaneously. So that is importantly different, right? Maybe playing catches like this. But as I said, there are intermediate cases where you can start seeing how you're in between these different cases. Okay. So these examples can be thought as different species of the same genus. They are importantly different from each other, but so what does it mean to say that? It means that each one case is paradigmatic of its own category. So we can describe this category, and it will give us different description in each case, even if there are intermediate cases. But they all together still belong to the genus of collective practical intentionality because they exhibit the properties that we describe in the genus. And they are joint activities in which roles are specified by the activity in normative terms. And the key point is that those structures, normative structures, can be given in different ways. They can be given by norms, they can be given by instructions, scripts, they can be given by spontaneous coordination, they can be given by jointly deliberating about it. So here we have minimal coordination cases, the cases in which this structure is given by spontaneous activity. Nothing of what comes, no rules, norms, or instructions. Then there are cases in which structures are given by non-rules of instruction. Then there are cases in which these are given by codes that are organized group, like in institutional settings. And then there are cases of joint practical reason. So cases in which the structure is given by us, those involved in the action, deliberating about how to do it and what to do and how to do it and so on. So these are different species of the same genus. something I cannot do without saying, which is that in all of these categories, this is like note. In all of the cases, mental acts are given their structures and contents by that which is outside, in a way. So this can be thought to be a kind of externalism about content and vehicles. In the sense that we're talking about norms and rules and scripts and activity in general, like activity in between people, as given the structure of these practices. This is something we can go back in discussion, but to me it's very important. And I think it's a feature of Jan's cognitive view as well. It's not something that needs to happen inside, as if the first, like in the manual picture. These can also be called a capacities view, in a sense in which I will say a bit more later, but in the idea that individuals, to be able to engage in this, have to have capacities, but these capacities are nothing but what is realized in their acting in these ways. Again, it's in the acting in these ways that we can ascribe these capacities. So one way of characterizing is saying that this is a kind of inside-outerism, which is a kind of a weird expression. But I was happy with that, just not to make it too similar to the, I don't know if people here are familiar with Otto's notebook in the studied mind discussion. And well, we can go back to that in the discussion, but it's not just, so it does not mean that, well, there's something outside doing the thing, and the subjects have no relation to this, but rather it's a capacities view in which external scaffolds play an essential role. Norms, rules, scaffold actions, and interactions. Okay. So, how am I doing?
It's still fine. You're on 40 minutes now. You're talking for 40 minutes now.
Okay.
15 minutes.
So, now here comes another interesting feature. Is that not only is the case that the genus comes in a species, but that the species require different kind of cognitive sophistication. So we can place and we can understand them as in terms of the varieties of degrees of cognitive complexity that are required to engage in these kinds of actions. So these range from very minimal forms of interactions and mutual understanding, like in the case where you spontaneously dance with one another or walk together, to more demanding forms that presuppose linguistic abilities for communication, like when I'm preparing dinner with a friend and we discuss how we are going to do this. That requires much more cognitive sophistication. It requires capacities for showing practical reasons. While the case of walking together or dancing spontaneously doesn't. So, from intersubjective spontaneous coordinated activities that involve mutual tracking, mutual responses, and mutual attunement, such as shared dancing, group music, improvisation, and so on, we move to more complex joint activities as the one scaffolded by instructions. For example, when we play together but by following a musical score. And actions that are scaffolded by social norms of institutions. For example, when we play chess together or drive along each other through a crowded street. And at the end of the spectrum, and this is important also to emphasize, we have complex activities. The more complex ones are not the norms case, but the cases in which you engage in the showing practical reasoning about what to do, right? And where there are rules that already specify those roles. Okay. So once we realize that we have these different forms of collective practical intentionality, and that come in different degrees of cognitive complexity, we might wonder about the development of these capacities, or rather about these capacities in development, so in the ontogeny, early stages of human individual life. And collective intentionality, then in psychologically speaking, develops through a continuum of different stages, we might say. Because we have these different cases of cognitive complexity, and also because, as I will argue now, because we can see how actually these forms of collective intentionality from the minimal to the more complex actually unfold in development. So we start with a minimal kind of collective intentionality that can be thought to underlie and support the development of more complex kinds that involve conventions, language, and institutions. Minimal, I said that minimal shared intentionality are these forms of non-cognitive demanding group cognition and feeling that are displayed in the act, including minimal coordination. Examples so far were the improvised dancing and the walking. And this, I said, is associated with a minimal and unsophisticated understanding of each other's mentality and agency because they involve this shared understanding. So this ability to coordinate and attune to others' directed actions and reactions and their emotional responses suffices to make sense of a minimal capacity for collective intentionality belonging to early infancy. And there is a set of evidence of babies' early engagements with others, interactive engagements with others. For example, the fact that babies from 2 to 4 months adjust their body posture to the caregiver's pickup styles, and this is an example that really explores, was already in which a mother had a broken arm, and then the very, very young baby was already putting the body in a different position to be picked up. So you can see this anticipatory sort of coordinating participation in a complex activity in babies that young. Other examples include what Rorschach calls proto-conversations at 2 or 3 months, where there is also this contingency of an attunement to each other's reactions. And then at 6 months, even more, that the baby's bodily complying to intentional directives by adults. So doing things, being told to do so already at 6 months. And what is characteristic of these forms of interaction in this view is that each participant's role in the activity is determined and structured by a shared activity that the dyad of the group is taking part, without the participants necessarily planning ahead or intellectually predicting or representing the mental status of others. Rather, the idea is that these participants have willingness to interact, so engage in a shared activity, but what is the result of this activity is determined by it's individuated, I say, or you can also say determined by the coordination. So it's in coordination. It's like, think of these cases as with the example of a spontaneous dance. So the resulting dance is a result of the participations of each one. There's nothing that the dance is except for the mutual adjustment of the movements of each other. But that only makes sense if we are involved in this activity together and we will this activity, or we have this willingness to interact. Okay, so we can scale up from here and think of exposure of children to multiple sources of social learning and training, and then a more developed form of collective intentionality emergence that includes the capacity, that at the end includes the capacity to think together with more complex groups, as part of a more complex group, and even understand perspectives that are alien to my group. One essential step of this progression is learning language. And learning language means learning cultural reservoir of rules and norms, and interacting through language with a number of different kinds of environmental scaffolds that are also within this shared space of joint activity, something that Trevarden places in what he calls secondary intersubjectivity that now is, by researchers, is placed around 6 months of age, 4 years later. Now, Gaspery and Trevarden are placing it quite early. So the progression to more complex language-dependent forms of collective intentionality involves the scaffolding of shared activities by shared cultural norms, and the exercise of guiding individual practical reasoning that together will make possible the emergence of reason-guided collective behavior to emerge, and also individual reason-guided behavior. So one good example is when children, babies of 6 months more or less, are already able to sit. So mothers, and because this is the recommendation of the doctors, will sit these children in the table, and we set the table around them, and we try to get them to use spoons, for example, which is really hard. They don't understand the spoon is like, it's not for eating. Hands might be for eating, but there is one, it's learning the practice of eating, which is a cultural practice. How you do it, why spoon and not a stick, and right, why don't you throw everything in the so there's a lot of scaffolding that the caregivers and the setting, the environmental setting, the table, the spoon, are doing and then organizing this activity for the child, right? So, in this development, children learn from other social norms, instructions that scaffold their social interactions, leading to a new form of collective intentionality to emerge. And this requires practical training in social practices. And this is essential for acquiring. So this is the example of the eating, right? And people, different researchers have used different terms and concepts to describe what are these capacities that allows us to get into this training with others. Some talk about social conformism, others mutual adaptation, input bias imitation, and natural pedagogy, for others, normative enforcement of in-group activities, and so on and so forth. But the idea is that there is some kind of engagement with the other or in the form of that can be described as capacities for social learning, imitation, and so on, that allows for this scaffolding of capacities to take place. And again, this is again a flag of clarification. Norms need not to be internalized. They can be thought as external scaffold. But what does that mean? Again, this is the capacities view, the idea that thinking itself is achieved in engaging with linguistic norms and linguistic affordances. So it's not the case that you somehow need to get the norm inside, and that's when you think. Rather, it's the idea that you acquire a new capacity, or the exercise of a new capacity. So this is the idea that enculturation is not explained through internalization. And this is a big debate. Just touch upon a little bit so we can talk more if you want. But the idea is that inner speech is not the interior aspect of external speech, but a function itself. It remains a speech, thought connected with words. Internalization then, what people have, there's so many people that have talked of enculturation and internalization. Right? Or is this process I was telling you about sophistication of psychological capacities, in this case of collective intentionality. And then this is not a process by which social relations are transferred to the brain, to the internal side of things, but rather it's a transition from one form of consciousness to another. So the transition is the enculturation. It's not explained. It doesn't explain enculturation. It's the same thing. So then another example of this is how children engage in storytelling, role-playing, and so going forward after the eating example. And then they get familiarized with sociocultural narratives. And this is where we can think that these capacities for thinking in terms of full psychological explanations or relations in which you start understanding the behavior of people in terms of their beliefs and desires starts to be exercised in role-playing, in being exposed to narratives, and also in these scaffolded activities of secondary intersubjectivity. And there we have a developing capacity for practical reasoning. So children start thinking why they are doing this or that, and why this character did that, and also in a story. And then more complex forms of group identification arise, and we can think of the end point of this as a form of understanding that it needs not to be shared. So it does not to be part of the same activity, but rather I can understand what the other is doing, but independently of my own view on things, which is what psychologists call passing the false belief test. So the idea that I can understand a perspective of another which I don't share, and it's connected with the idea of understanding the idea of perspective in general. Something tied to my own way of thinking about something. So we can think of this as more complicated forms of collective intentionality. And we can think of these capacities of practical reasoning, involve the formation of long-standing goals that require more complex planning, coordination through time, and also presuppose normative pressure on individuals to provide expected contributions. Yes. More complicated there, you have more complicated collective intentionality. And we can think that this capacity to think in very complicated terms of contributing to a group goal, it's something that it's connected with the ability to occupy institutional roles and act in the service of the life and existence of large organized groups. So at the end of all of this process, we have fully autonomous individuals that are in the position to discuss, criticize, modify, and create normative practices by themselves. And we are norms in the higher level can be thought to help with the criticism of norms of the lower level, so the kind of thing that you are prone to do by means of this spontaneous and two-dimensional emotional responding to each other. Okay, so what's the time?
Still have 5 minutes.
Okay, so there is this.
Or we can talk more, and we'll have shorter discussion. So we still have like
5 minutes to the 50 or 5 minutes to the 60?
We still have like 35 minutes until the end.
Okay, then I can maybe say something about this. Let me just recap. So I started with this idea of how to think of collective action in a way which is both unified but not reductive. We went through what the genus is, and then we said that there are species, and then we further said that this species can be seen as having unfolded in development through the further complexity of the both environment, the interactions, and the psychological capacities involved. Now I want to say something very brief about evolution, because I know people here work on this and it's very interesting. But so far I just discussed development. Now I'm going to say a little bit about collective. It will be only a little bit so I can be on time. So, first point I want to make, well, we've moved from ontogeny to phylogeny. And the first point is that while investigation on psychological mechanisms is in part constrained by evolutionary history, the latter gives away into the study of the former. So studies on how things evolve might importantly give you clues about the psychological mechanisms. Ontogeny does not recapitulate phylogeny. This is widespread agreement that this would be a mistake to think that this is just the same thing, just the constraints are different. So because of this, I think we can understand the claim that this is just not the same genus. In a way, it's not the same genus. The genus we're describing is a genus which is species unfold in ontogeny. Yet, the study of importantly different forms of collective intentionality in the human lineage is key for what I call, and people have given different names to this, the cooperative evolutionary hypothesis. And what is this? We heard this morning about it. The idea that the capacity for social cooperation is at the heart of the human species' capacities for understanding each other's behavior and mental states, and all, leading to an explanation of how humans came to share thoughts and language, and thus an explanation of their specific forms of action and cognition. So, even if I think it would be a mistake to consider these other cases in the phylogeny as cases of the same genus, I think we can address the genealogy of the genus, which in Greek is the logos of the genia, which is the knowledge of generation, knowledge of origins of the genus. And here is my tentative idea about it, which we discussed in the workshop a bit more, which is the idea that some mechanisms for social conformism, so mechanisms, the ones that I was describing in my coordination cases, mechanisms for adjustment of behavior for emotional tuning, of approval and disapproval, shaping of dispositions to match each other's dispositions and monitoring standards for compliance, which is what Haugland calls social conformism. Those can be traced back to the common ancestor of humans, chimps and bonobos. Because you can see that this also happens with chimps and bonobos. Yet, there are different forms of normative scaffolding and social organization and cooperation that are characteristic of each of these forms of life. And we can think that these stabilize through feedback loops that give rise, to special cognitive and cognitive and affective capacities, and that each set of capacities sustains and stabilizes different forms of social organization. In the case of chimps, in the case of bonobos, in the case of humans, and that these forms of social organization were key for survival and reproduction. So the key idea is that different forms of collective intentionality, coordination, and social conformism associated with different kinds of norms allow for different forms of cooperative collective action and interaction that were beneficial for the fitness of each hominid species and provided the context for special norms. For example, differential norms of practical and theoretical reason and making too much. So you have different forms of cooperation and collective action that in turn provide platforms for dimensions of other forms. And we can give an example of this. We can distinguish between structures of authority, of subordinate and dominant, where we have relatively established roles in cooperation, as in the case of humans and chimps, and different kinds of norm, complex and abstract, which are those involving language, mathematics, and reciprocation of the kind we have, and that can be thought to have transformed collective intentionality into forms that are more abstract, more general, flexible, and objective. And we can think of a number of elements of evidence of the different forms of collective activity in which the different species were involved or are involved now, what happened in between. All right. So that's, I said it was short. Part one evolution is short. And now I'm summing up. Just a few, emphasizing the ideas. I said that for an activity to be collectively shared is for the participants to have shared understanding of the activity they are engaging. I say that this is not a necessary condition, but a characterization of collective intentionality in its paradigmatic instances. I said that minimal to complex the shared understanding can be based on different psychological mechanisms. It can be done or access through coordination, attunement of feeling and emotions, but also knowledge of shared norms, instructions, and sharing reasons on why and how to act. Then, collective intentionality can be thought to come in degrees of cognitive complexity and distributed along a developmental continuum that involves the scaffolding of shared activities by different social practices and cultural artifacts. I also say that ontogeny does not recapitulate phylogeny, so not the same genus. But there are reasons for thinking that capacity for social cooperation and collective action, understood in the context of different forms of life in our lineage, were beneficial for reproduction fitness, leading to the emergence of the genus here described. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you for the talk. We can start the discussion. Do you have any questions?
Students first?
Well, it doesn't matter to me. Any questions? So, lots of
I don't have questions, but just for clarification, I just lost my extended mind because of discharge, so I had questions in that, and I have to reconcile them. So, just one of the last slides that you said in the summing up section. Could you go back to the first of summing up? Yeah, and here. Okay. So in this slide it said that shared understanding of the activity is not a necessary condition for an action to be collective, but it's a characterization of paradigmatic case instances. But then it seems to me that when we move to the second slide, it seemed like that you would like to retain some kind of shared understanding for all kinds of collective activities ranging from minimal to more complex, because here you say from minimal to complex, the shared understanding can be based on different psychological mechanisms. So I'm not sure if it's not necessary. So why then to say that virtually on all cases, minimal complex, there is some kind of shared understanding, although it needs different mechanisms.
Right.
So.
Okay, you might think that I'm pulling a trick here, but the idea is that so in both in the species and in all of the species we are talking about the same genus, because we're talking about the genus of collective practical intentionality. In that genus, the paradigmatic cases of that genus, paradigmatic cases of that genus involve shared understanding, and we understand the genus through those cases. So I think that so if the case of cooking the meal together is one example of a paradigmatic, then we can think that the shared dancing is also paradigmatic, because they are all, if you want, you can have like the idea of a focus here, where you have all of the paradigmatics, and then cases that sort of move. But you have the more complex and the easier and the minimal ones in the center. So they all have shared understanding. But then when you move to the sides, and you can think, well, I don't know, I'm just improvising this drawing. But when you move to the sides, there's many features that are lost. So for example, in the case of the group, in the ship and storm, there is no, there is vestiges of the shared understanding, but they don't have shared understanding because, the captain released the order, he has no idea if the order is carried out or who is doing it. And the one that gets the order knows nothing about the reasons. He might think this is wrong, like, why are we pulling this rope? We will get killed, right? So this is a case like that here, but of the sophisticated. Now you might think of cases like that also for the minimal coordination practice. So suppose that we are dancing together and I get very distracted and I start thinking about something else and I'm just standing there. Well, we're like, where are we dancing? At some point it will break down and it's not collective intentionality or not a shared action anymore. But at some point there is a gray area. So the idea is that all of the different species it can be paradigmatic of the genus, and yet they can also be. Is that?
Yeah. So, but there is some form of shared understanding. Like all the activities, all the different one.
In a way.
In a way.
But it can. Yeah. But I don't. This is not a necessary or it's not a necessary, not sufficient condition. Because it's rather that you have paradigmatic instances through which we understand, but then you might have some elements that make the action collective without the vision understanding. Like in the case of the ship in the storm, or the case in which we there are interesting cases that are borderline, like for example, if we are dancing, I'm thinking I'm dancing with, I'm looking at the mirror, I'm thinking I'm dancing with someone, you're thinking I'm dancing with another one. Is this a case? I think this is an open question. I think that there is a, we can ask this question in several domains. We can ask, are there same capacities involved? If they are, then yeah, maybe. And to what extent should I understand this case as a case of error? Well, we can only understand it as a case of error if we sort of understand it through the paradigmatic case. So you see how the idea.
Yeah, I understand the just this is kind of a friendly question. I also want to sort out what's going on because it's very interesting. Also, why is the paradigmatic case chosen as it is? Because so this is this sort of intellectual case with this normative structure of means ends relations, and then it looks like at the beginning it looked like, but now we are not going to add as the standard additive conceptions like, for instance, Butterfield and so on. We are going to subtract, which also probably is not your idea, to subtract some features from the default case, from the paradigmatic case, which you started with. On the one hand, it looks like that, because when you start with this robot shared understanding of why and how we are doing this activity, or why and how we are participating in them, it seems to be that you can only go to the more minimal forms in a way, which do not have this kind of cognitive complexity. But then I think probably it's not the idea that you can just subtract. And my question was, why not start with other paradigmatic examples, for instance, spontaneous joint action, which even doesn't seem to me to have this kind of structure, because, for instance, when somebody is...
Bit shorter.
Sorry?
Bit shorter. We have
bit shorter.
Because
so I'm thinking online, because I don't have the question before me. But, you know, it occurred to me that when they are going spontaneously to dance with somebody, which doesn't happen to me very often, but I can imagine some such people, they do not even know that there is some other purpose, like structuring, except of dancing just, and not even how they do that.
Okay. So I don't know if I'm going to address everything that is in your mind, because I can see you have worries that you're still not telling me or not completely articulating, but I can tell you, the sort of the kitchen of the kitchen in the sense of what is behind it and why these cases. Well, the cases are important because we can make sense of them developmentally. So obviously you can choose different. So this is one part of the question. So part of the part of the answer to the question is that the define this species is relevant because we can understand this in ontogeny. But one point I wanted to make is there are several ways in which you can do that. Precisely, the Butterfield way, which is to think that these are independent of the more unfolded kinds. I don't think they are independent. I think they have. I like this idea of the activity, which is they are structuring the thing, and that our capacities of understanding activities are not something that is not a layer in the sense of the additive. So it's not like there is the activity, then on top of that we think about it. It's just that, the activity has in itself activity in the world, involves things that happen one after the other, time and means ends, and that I think of that more as something that is in the world, and then we unfold capacities for thinking about it. So, yeah, but you can take it either way. I like the idea of speaking of the genius, because I think sometimes when you go bottom up, you lose some of these characteristics of this idea of the unfolding of the capacity. Right, but the story won't be the same if I'm telling you about the phylogeny, for the reasons I mentioned. So the thing will look a little different. But now we're talking of this capacity as a capacity that unifies these different cases of collective intentionality.
So I wanted to ask about the status of the genus concept. Okay. So as I understood at the beginning, you were interested in avoiding a couple of moves that people might be inclined to make. On the one hand, we have pluralism that says we just have a disparate group of phenomena here that doesn't have any kind of unifying account. On the other, we have some kind of a reductive analysis, and that's going to be associated with necessary and sufficient conditions. And your proposal is to take this Wittgensteinian line, look at some paradigmatic instances and see if I understand you correctly, see if from a handful of these paradigmatic instances we can distill up a sort of sense of the genus, and then that'll give us some kind of a unifying account that avoids pluralism, but then it isn't reductive.
Yeah.
But is the genus going to give us necessary and sufficient conditions?
No.
It's not. Okay. So then I wonder, in what sense is it a genus then? Because I mean, it's tough for me to think of something as a genus except insofar as it specifies criteria for sorting things according to whether or not they fall.
It does specify criteria, but it's not through necessary and sufficient conditions.
So it does specify criteria.
Yes, it is a criteria. Well, it's a very Wittgensteinian idea, but the idea is that it's when I suppose that I haven't ever experienced going to a store to buy vegetables. And then you say, well, come with me. I show you. And then we go and buy vegetables. And then, so in a way, this particular way in which you did it, and I saw it, is not. It's just it's one instance, right? And then. So one thing you might think is that, there are these properties that have always to be the case. Well, maybe there are many ways in which you can go and buy vegetables, some of which might make the buying of the vegetables break down, but others won't. So then you can ask for each particular feature of that instance, whether what happens if it goes away. So for example, suppose that you gave money in exchange of vegetables. But then, at this other store, that you can change it for clothing, whatever. Suppose that, I don't know, that, you bought frozen vegetables, and in this other store they only do natural. So all of that can sort of be changed and still be a case of going to buy the vegetables. But obviously, if everything breaks down together, there's no going to, the chest disappears. So so that's the sort of, so you have a case in which you can, yet the thing gives you an understanding of what I don't know. I can know what it is by this instance. I can know this. And I haven't, right? So anyway, so the idea is that the other methodology, the methodology of necessary and sufficient conditions, will has many problems. One of the problems it has is that it makes it that the thing that makes a case of the kind is something different from the very thing. Suppose that you say you need to give money in exchange. That's not what buying vegetables is. So in a way, any explanation of the collective marketplace will be circular. It's like, what is collective action? You know collective action. And that's why you cannot do the other thing, because if you do the other thing, you sort of talk about something else. So that's one problem that I didn't say, but it's behind it. And the idea is that, well, it's not by having this underlying property, which that's why it's reductive, because it displaces the issue to something different. So it's not by thinking of this other property that underlies that you understand the genus. Now, obviously, when you're using the word genus here, I'm not thinking this is probably something I should have clarified before. I'm not using this term in the sense of people talking about the species when they say human species. I'm not doing that. That's right. I'm not doing that. So in that way, it's a bit confusing, maybe, the terminology, because I think so there are different forms in which you can think. So one idea is the idea of essential. So property and objects that are explained through the property. That's maybe what you would think. That's the one that can be described in terms of necessary or sufficient conditions. So objects that can be defined in terms of a property. That's like essential definition. You can do that. This is one kind of thing. This is not what we do when we explain human activity. It's what we do when we explain, for example, in what sense water is H2O. I think that's not, it might also be what we do when we explain neurons, but not when we understand the activity of the brain in an organism. That gets more complicated. I think it requires a different methodology.
Okay, thanks.
I have a sort of similar question, or question going in the same direction. My question is, what's the explanatory role of the notion of collective intentionality, if understood in your way? Because clearly you cannot, it must be problematic to make generalizations, and I assume that it's problematic to use it in some causal explanations of things. So when you want to explain why some person behaved in such and such way, it's hard to use this notion of collective intentionality. What you have to use is some notion of some type of, or some species of collective intentionality to explain why this person behaved. So it seems to me that the explanatory role shrinks kind of for the notion of collective intentionality, if understood by practice. Is that the case?
Okay, that's a very interesting question, I think. I would like to say more about what do you think that is lost in this kind of, what aspect of explanation is lost that you think is important to preserve?
So there are two things. First, if different species of collective intentionality or shared intentionality are based on different psychological mechanisms,
yes,
then different types of behavior of people must be explained via different species of collective intentionality, not via without using the notion of genus. So it's kind of redundant. On the other hand, also I don't see how you can generalize different types of behavior of people that fits to different types of different species of collective intentionality. So how you can make a generalization, some kind of generalization. Like generalization is that humans have lungs, let's say, and you use genus of human to make such a kind of generalization. I don't see how you can make generalizations if collective intentionality is understood by a parametric basis.
Okay. So that's an important question, so I'll try to say more. Okay, no, it's not the case that you can understand the species without referring to the genus. That's just not the case, because you actually understand that you understand the species by understanding the genus, not the other way around. So because you understand that, there is shared understanding, you can make sense of the basic interactions, because so what really gives the intelligibility to the thing is the fact that they are cases of the genus. It's not you have a species, you have another, and you extract something that is in common. That would be the reductive. So the reductive has first cases and then thinks of what they have in common and goes general about it. This is more like you have a paradigmatic case, maybe very complex, and you understand that case, and then you can ask questions about how this is exemplified or whether at all in different cases, or you can ask, which I think is interesting, of these developmental and phylogenetic questions. If, the account is plausible, and then that's another problem, right? How do you know that the account is plausible? That's a big one. And the idea, I think, is more if you follow these distinctions in the sort of hermeneutical tradition between explanation and understanding, this falls more into the understanding than the explanatory. I thought you were trying that. But the idea is that, because, so I think we can understand these cases of activity in terms of the genus I described. And this connects to something Lazo was asking about why you started where you started, why these very intellectualized cases. But I'm trying to target here, if you look at the definition I gave of it's very far from here, but of the genus, this definition is trying to integrate a lot of different theories. Okay, so the definition of the genus is integrating a lot of different theories of collective action. Let me see if it's this one.
This one.
I think it's this one. So you have the idea of commitment, you have the idea of a structure. A structure of appropriate related participations is really keen to Bradman, for example. Commitment is really keen to Greenberg. And the we, which is in the next slide, is really keen to Hans-Werner Schmidt's view and plural subjects. So I'm thinking of, I think it's in a way sort of synthesizing ways in which people think about it, so it will make it plausible, at least for a lot of philosophers. But the philosophers have reasons for thinking this is correct, so we can discuss long about it. Yeah, I don't know if that's...
Okay.
But the main point is this: you don't think of the species independently of the genus. You understand it because you understand the right. And this is very important. This is why I needed to start there.
Okay. Any other questions? Yeah, no?
I'm still wrestling with the boundaries of the concept of collective intentionality. So one thing is, it seems to me you characterize it partly in behavioral terms, partly in psychological terms. So sorry. It's not clear to me was the relationship between this. For example, whether there can be a coordinated collective action, which is not the case of collective intentionality. Another thing is that when you start to talk about norms, institutions, and culturation, it seems to me that you are putting it in such a way that all these things kind of subserve the goal of development, higher form of collective intentionality. And this seems to me to be possible to state only at the cost of making the concept of collective intentionality excessively wide and thin, because then it seems to me everything we do will be collective intentionality. Because, for example, imagine I go to a bank to make a deposit, so it seems to be not a collective action, but a bank is an institution. By making a deposit, I take part in the institution, as it were. So then it seems to me, in such a case, everything we do will be a collective intention.
Well, okay. Yeah, I think I'm guilty of that. I think I endorse that. I think that, practices, human practices are social practices, and the way of making sense of that is in part in terms of collective intentionality. I do think that. So I don't think we can understand social practices of the kind we have, including going to the bank, traveling in the street, doing this when you're over here, without this notion of without a notion of collective intentionality. I don't think that. Yeah, so now it's the dialectics of what are the elements and what can be. So whether it looks too thin or too trivial in the sense that anything can get into it. I think so. I try to address two things I want to say. First is that in this paper I'm only talking about, except for the well-being part, which touches upon nothing, but a little bit, but it's about practical collective intentionality. And so the discussion of other forms of like what is shared and belief or this kind of thing, it's not, I don't think this is in the same genus. So then the story would be a bit more complicated. But about the practical, I do think that the genus captures something which is quite specific. I don't think that this is just, it's giving you something that's understood in terms of means and ends. It's understood in terms of a normativity that comes with that structure. Is it understood also through the idea of shared understanding? So, to put it in one way, those that are not able to have this understanding and not able to participate in this collective form of life, those who are not able to engage in these structures of activity are not able to participate, not in the same way. Maybe they are able to participate in other ways. So this needs not to exhaust all categories of social life, and that's the claim with the genes and honor. that there are other categories for social life for them. But in our case, for the domain of shared action, I think that yes, that these shared activities, including the institutional ones, have these structures.
But it seems to me that the concept of collective intentionality is partly useful because it's contrasted with something like individual intentionality. And in this way, it seems to me that even the paradigmatic case of people putting bottles and cups on the table independently of each other will be a case of collective intentionality because we are all enculturated in a certain way and we know that we should put the cup carefully on the table, not smash it on the floor or something like that. So will there be any case of something which is not collective intentionality?
No, I don't think that in order to have a collective action you need more than one subject. So there are two different questions. While collective intentionality requires more than one subject. So I can't be doing the dances. If I'm doing the dancing alone, I'm not dancing with another. Doesn't matter what I'm imagining. I may be imagining dancing with whatever, this handsome actor, but I'm alone in my room. Whatever. But that is different from the question of what is constitutive of individual intentionality. And that is a question maybe you might thought that I addressed it when I was talking about the children. So I think that capacities for individual intentionality unfold in collective intentional settings, which is not to say that they are collective, that all individual intentionality is collective. Collective intentionality characterizes collective action, and then for that you need more than one subject. You might have a lot of subjects, anonymous subjects, very known subjects, whatever, but more than one. Individual intentionality is different, but I do think, but I didn't argue for it, only I pointed towards that idea in the developmental case, or maybe in the evolving case, that the space for individual intentionality in the human case is provided by collective intentionality. So that without language, I'll give you an example, without language, I think that paradigmatic capacities for individual intentionality, including, practical reasoning of what I'm going to do, do not unfold. And language is a collective action, or a collective activity, or a set of very complex collective activities. But I don't wanna make the other. So in that I think I disagree with her.
Yeah, sure.
Just spelling out perhaps Glenda's question. I understand the motive, but somebody can say that. For example, the people putting glasses on the table and they do not make up the table together. But still there is a number of people involved in the example. And we would say that they are not coordinating, but in a sense they are coordinating because nobody of them is throwing the glass like on the floor. So in a way they are coordinating in terms that they are respecting some social norms.
Okay.
So then you can say that even this kind of action sort of fulfills the minimal condition because there is a number of subjects doing something, although they do not probably can be said to pursue the same purpose of making up the table, but still they can be said in some sense of following the purpose of respecting some social norm or convention. So the question is, if you have...
Well, I mean, I guess, no, that's thanks. I think it's a good follow-up because it illuminates, I think, what Glenda was thinking as well. Like this idea that when in that case, in the case where you have the norms, because the action can be scaffolded by norms are shared with others, then it will count as collective even if there are no other subjects involved. So my examples of paradigmatic cases of shared norms are still cases in which there are several subjects involved, like the orchestra play, the tennis play, the tango. So I think I want to give the same answer. I want to say collective action requires the activity of more than one subject, but individual intentionality is in a sense constituted, individual intentionality in the human case, in human specific case, in human is constituted by activities which are collective, so it is understood through the genus that I'm describing. I don't think I did only point to that argument by means of the developmental evolution. Maybe you already know because you also, I gave this other talk, but so the idea is, maybe it's already pervasive in how I'm thinking of the developmental evolution. But I think that basically the idea is that the collective action with other subjects, absolutely concrete, embodied people or hominids.
Okay.
Those were the cradle for the intention, individual.
You can talk
Okay.
about it.
I have to stop the talk because they're over time.
Okay.
So thank you once more.